Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here today. So for the next 15 minutes, as Dr. Abide alluded to, I'll be really giving a broad overview about the potential of exercise in reducing one's dementia risk. And Dr. Lee really has provided a good sort of segue into my talk, and there's also quite a bit of overlap. And I'm actually very glad for that, because I think a key goal today is to really reiterate and emphasize that you can do a lot to shape your cognitive and brain health, and that, what you do every day can really make an impact. So to start, I think we're all here today because we are interested in aging well, right? We want to age and still enjoy life and maintain our function. And aging well as a topic has probably never been hotter than it has been probably in the last 5 years. And why? Because the world's population is aging. And certainly in Canada, we're seeing similar demographics. If anything, back in 2010, Stat Canada actually released this particular graph estimating that by 2017, we'll have more older adults than children in Canada for the first time ever. Does anybody know if we're on projection? Like, are we on pace? Are we behind these projections? Does anybody know? We've already exceeded it. We actually reached this threshold in the summer of 2015. So around 6 months ago, there's been more older Canadians than children. And so we're really facing potentially a crisis because as all of you already heard, age is the single greatest risk factor for developing dementia. And so that begs the question, if age is the single biggest risk factor for dementia, is brain failure inevitable as you age? And hopefully now all of you would say no, right? So the short answer is absolutely not. Again, as Dr. Lee alluded to or kind of emphasized to all of you, you do know individuals who have aged very, very well in their 80s, 85s, and they're just as sharp as they were back when they're 45 years old. Maybe some slight changes, but they really are still fully functional. In the past, I would say that most of us thought that, it may be quite common or sort of the common consequence of the aging to lose sort of your marbles, as they would say, simply because we did document and notice that with age, you typically do see changes in cognition and as well as real significant changes in the brain, such as shrinkage of the brain matter, etc. However, we do understand that there is a lot of variability. Again, you have observed it, and we observed it in research as well. And notably, what we have recognized over the last decade is that even among those individuals who actually have pathology that we can actually document, they still are functioning really, really well. So why is that? So if their brain actually have some degree of disease that we can actually observe, how come they're still functioning so well? That is what we call variability per se, meaning that not everyone ages the same. And what underlies that is actually the piggy bank that Dr. Lee alluded to. Okay? The more sort of technical term that I'll use today is your cognitive and brain reserve. And how I want you to sort of perceive those two concepts is that brain reserve would be sort of literally how much brain cells you have. Okay, so how much volume of brain matter you have at any given time. And believe it or not, you can change that amount through different behaviors such as exercise or better nutrition. And the other piece is cognitive reserve, which is how adaptive your brain is. And so think about it, if it's a computer system, brain reserve is your hardware and cognitive reserve is your software. And if you imagine when you're shopping for a computer system, you can buy better models or not, right? And you can also improve your hardware or buy the better version of software. So it's very adaptable. So what dictates your cognitive and brain reserve? Well, first of all, genetics does contribute to a certain degree by which the amount of reserve you do have, okay? The environment also has a huge impact. And then there's also an interaction by which of your genetics and the environment. And when I talk about environment, I'm really talking about both in terms of the lifespan experience you have, such as your education, the level of social and intellectual engagement that you sort of engage yourselves with, but also the behaviors such as regular physical activity, how well do you eat, and even how well do you sleep. And so for today, what I'll focus on is physical activity. A key aspect of how you can change your reserve, both cognitive and brain reserve, is the concept of neuroplasticity, which is the ability of your brain to actually change in response to sort of the environment you expose it to. And I want to highlight your brain can adapt negatively or positively. So if you are not sleeping well, eating a high-fat diet, simply not living a healthy lifestyle, your brain can adapt poorly. If you switch and adopt better behaviors, your brain would adapt positively. So I do want to highlight neuroplasticity can work for or against you. It's actually your choice. Okay? So you need to make those choices every day. And again, neuroplasticity basically alludes to the fact that your brain can change both its structure and function throughout the lifespan. Certainly, you have more neuroplasticity when you're younger, but we now also recognize as you age, you still retain a certain degree of it. So the summary is that you can change your brain. Now, believe it or not, I still do encounter individuals who sometimes are just really surprised that something as simple as exercise can be beneficial for the brain. And you've probably heard the term, what is good for your heart is good for your brain, or what is good for your body is good for your brain. And that shouldn't be surprising, right? Because your brain or your head is attached to your physical body. And as an organ, the brain is actually the best customer of your heart and lungs. So as the boy in Jerry Maguire taught all of us, your brain weighs all of 3 pounds, but actually takes 20% of your entire blood supply and oxygen intake. And as Dr. Lee alluded to, when you are maintaining good physical health, you maintain good brain health because you do actually reduce many of the risk factors we know that contribute to your risk, such as hypertension and diabetes. Did you know if you have diabetes, you potentially have twice the risk of developing dementia as someone who does not? So what is the potential of exercise? Let's sort of get to the key focus of the talk today. So first, I want to introduce a study that was actually published back in 2011 by my colleague Kirk Erickson from the University of Pittsburgh, where he enrolled otherwise healthy community-dwelling older adults, so people who are living in their own homes and rather healthy, into a 3 times per week walking program, and it was moderate pace. Okay, so not a running program, but a walking program. And what he found after 12 months of training, those individuals who were in the walking group actually increased the volume of the memory center of the brain called the hippocampus, and equated to reversing literally the brain age of the hippocampus by up to 2 years. And that is significant because what we do know is that typically when you age, the hippocampus shrinks. And its shrinkage is actually magnified if you do have Alzheimer's disease. And yet here, what he's demonstrated, you can actually reverse that typical pattern we see with normal aging. So he actually demonstrated an increase of 2%, which is, again, depending what you think about, it may not seem like a heck of a lot. So if you're thinking about interest rates or RSP returns, not too impressive, is it? But that really does equate to literally reversing what we typically would see in terms of decline in hippocampal volume by upwards of 2 years. So it really is significant in this context. In addition to seeing the structural change in the brain, he also observed that those in the walking group actually improved their memory performance as compared to when they first enrolled into the study, and as well as to those individuals who were not randomized to the walking program. In his earlier group, when he was actually just working as postdoc, he also demonstrated that walking can also increase the efficiency by which your brain works. So now think about the software, okay? Think about the computer, and now we're talking about the software. How efficient is your computer, right? When you pull up a program, how quickly can it pull it up, and how quickly can it, sort of switch from PowerPoint to Excel spreadsheet? And so here what he's really demonstrating is that with exercise, you can actually increase the efficiency by which the brain works when being challenged to do a cognitive task. Again, very impressive. We're not talking about maintenance of, we're actually seeing an improvement of. Now, those 2 studies were among otherwise healthy older adults. So typically the next question is, well, can the benefit of exercise still be evident among those who we know are at greater risk? So for those individuals who are already showing some decline, and the answer is actually yes. So in our own research lab, we have demonstrated that walking can also have significant benefit for those individuals who are already showing some mild changes in their cognition, and that, they potentially are at greater risk for developing dementia over time. And among this particular group of individuals, we also saw that walking can actually increase the hippocampal sample volume as well, but it took a shorter time. So Kirk demonstrated that increase over a 12-month period, while we actually observed it within 6 months. Other investigators, such as Laura Baker, has also suggested that walking can actually have a beneficial impact on Alzheimer's disease pathology. Again, that is difficult to acquire or to measure per se well in humans, but there are sort of indirect ways. And so what she observed is that with exercise, so again, walking at a moderate pace, but 4 times per week, reduced plasma levels of amyloid beta 142. And again, this is plasma levels, not central levels. But animal models also do support this notion. So even back in 2008, it was shown that with treadmill running or wheel running, that it can actually reduce amyloid beta in the brain of these mouse. Now, you can say, well, I hate to walk. I have really significant osteoarthritis or some type of musculoskeletal limitation, and that's very common as we age. Or you might even hate the rain, or potentially for a more practical reason, if you do have an individual who already have some cognitive issues, you may simply be worried that they might get lost, and that is, those are true concerns. Well, the good news is that there are alternatives to, let's say, walking. So when we look at exercise, we want to think about types of exercise. And that's sort of the research direction that I'm going, is really to better understand how different types of exercise may be beneficial, whether they have common benefits or divergent benefits. And so when we talk about exercise, there's 2 main types. Aerobic training, which alludes to types of exercises that work at increasing your heart rate, increasing your cardiovascular health. So moderate pace walking, running, swimming would all fall under that umbrella. But the other type of exercise that is very important for healthy aging overall is resistance training or lifting weights to increase your muscle strength or muscle power. And again, as we age, we typically do become weaker because there is a process that's called sarcopenia, whereby you actually lose muscle fibers and muscle strength. And we do need to counteract that because you need to be strong to be functional. And within the context of exercise neuroscience, in the past, strength training really hasn't received a lot of attention. There's a number of reasons as to why. One, I think, is because when we look at how things work, we use animal models, and it's actually really hard to develop an animal model of lifting weights. You can put rats in a cage and get them to run, but developing a really good design of lifting weights is difficult. And I think the other piece is that it's a bit of an intuitive feel. So whenever I talk to people and say, exercise is beneficial, right away they think of, because it increases blood flow to your brain. And it does, but in many ways, the benefit of exercise is much more sort of complex and eloquent than that. And so I think that's why there's always been sort of a bias or focus on aerobic training. But from my perspective as a physical therapist, there is a need to offer a wider variety of options to individuals because, again, everyone has a unique set of abilities and potential limitations, and you want to work around that. And so resistance training has really been a focus in my lab within the context of healthy aging, but also within the context of brain aging. And so what we have shown through a series of studies is that lifting weights really do have similar benefits to aerobic training in that it does have benefit for memory, executive function, and also conflict resolution. And we also demonstrate that these benefits reside both in otherwise healthy older adults, but also those who have some degree of cognitive decline. And I think sort of one of the most exciting findings we've shared as of late with the public is that we also found that with resistance training, it actually may have impact on, again, underlying pathology. So here specifically, we demonstrated that if you do lift weights over a 12-month period, that you could actually reduce the progression of white matter lesions. So these lesions are what we could call as sort of silent strokes. They're quite covert in the sense that you don't even know you have have them. But they're common actually because they're highly associated with cardiovascular disease such as hypertension or diabetes. And if you do have them, you do have an increased risk of developing vascular cognitive impairment as well as having an actual clinical stroke. And for the first time, we actually demonstrated that with exercise and specifically with strength training, you can actually reduce the progression of this particular disease within the white matter. And certainly, I think the knowledge that there are other types of exercise that are beneficial for the brain is sort of getting spread out there to the public. And so this is actually a cartoon that was recently published in the New Yorker that really kind of jokes about the potential benefit of strength training on your brain health. I thought it was quite cute, so I wanted to share that. And just to harp a little bit more in case I haven't convinced you, because in some ways, sometimes when things are simple, it's really kind of hard to believe it. And I think that's why I think it's great that Dr. Lee showed that cartoon where it basically lists exercise 6 or 7 times. But it does really reflect the reality, which is I feel like we repeat the message over and over again, and yet sometimes there's still some type of mental barrier in adopting it. So just to highlight, it has been estimated that reducing physical inactivity even by 25% could prevent 1 million cases of dementia worldwide. And as Dr. Lee already, I keep wanting to say he's Dr. Phil, but Dr. Lee, he's much more eloquent than Dr. Phil. Starting in late life is not futile. You definitely can still reap the benefits, and that's really backed up by a number of research studies now. The other piece is that a little can really go a long way. I just want to emphasize that studies have shown even if you walk as little as 1 kilometer per day, you can actually reduce your risk of developing cognitive impairment over a 9-year period, and that this particular study also had neuroimaging evidence that by doing this minimal volume, you can actually even preserve the amount of brain volume you have over time. And so what does 1 kilometer look like? Well, if you live in Vancouver, it's roughly 10 city blocks. Or if you are a track walker, you like to go to the track at the local schools, is 2.5 times around it. So we're really not talking about heavy an investment. In terms of time, if you're otherwise healthy, I've paced it out for you. It's roughly a 13-minute walk. And if you are a little bit more frail and have a slower walking speed, is a 26-minute walk. I'm short on time, so I'm going to go through the last few slides really quickly, which is if you're not active now, challenge yourself. When we talk about exercise, I really want to emphasize it's not about going to the gym, absolutely. There's other ways you can build exercise into your daily lives. I've provided some just brief examples. Even if you're washing dishes, you can build some strength training in. Even if you're watching TV, you can do it. Okay, there's really no excuses. And lastly, if I still haven't convinced you, reverse the psychology. If you're not going to exercise for an hour every day, at least minimize your sitting and lying down time to 23.5 hours a day. Okay? Great. Thank you.